I have this first slide right here has our contact information of the three of us here. I really encourage people to reach out. I think Michelle and Tom are some of the most generous people out there for advice and giving experience. Both of them have been on the Passive House Massachusetts board for a long time and given a lot of time. And just starting out, you know, Massachusetts, like I said, Michelle worked on one project in South Boston, the South Distillery project. And that was really the first one in the state. And at the time, I worked for a state agency, a quasi-governmental agency, and we were seeing all the amazing work that was happening in Pennsylvania on multifamily affordable housing. We were hearing a lot of great stories about what was happening in New York, in Connecticut, New Hampshire, even some projects in Maine. And we were saying, why can't we do more of this in Massachusetts? And at the time, I think there's just a lot of concern about cost, honestly. And so we weren't having any luck getting like extra points with tax credits, and because people thought it might be too expensive. And so my agency said, hey, we don't really think it's going to be that expensive. Let's try, let's see. And so we started a program. We provided up to $4,000 per unit for 8 affordable housing projects. And you see 6 of them here. The other 2 are under construction also. And so this was really just to sort of jump start the industry, do a lot of really good tracking on where we saw costs increase and where we didn't, because I think there's a lot of sort of myths about things. And so these 6 projects, you'll see they're in a lot of different towns all across Massachusetts, some in urban Boston areas of sort of high rises like and Cambridge and Boston. There's some that are very suburban sites. So the Hanson Village one is actually something that Dakota Partners is doing as sort of I would call it a template for a whole bunch of different sort of suburban style affordable housing complexes that they're doing. We have Harbor Village, which is going to be talked about today in the upper right there with the thin brick. I love this project. I actually, at the ribbon cutting, I walked right past it because it fit in so well with the main street in Gloucester that I didn't realize that was the building that I was supposed to be going into. And then North Commons in Northampton, there at the bottom is, it's actually the one with the highest cost of all the ones we have. And I think the reason is pretty obvious if you look at the roof line, right? Pretty complicated roof line and so most of these projects, so far the incremental costs have been surprisingly low to me. So we've seen on average 2.4% incremental cost from the initial base case. And the highest one is North Commons with that more complicated roof line. I will say it's been really interesting tracking sort of what's changed in each of these projects. In all 8 of the projects, the highest incremental cost in Massachusetts has been related to bringing fresh air to every room. So that ventilation increase that you get with Passive House, that's so important of that is very different than what we have in code in Massachusetts, where we only need 1 supply. And so that has for sure been the highest cost. I guess I generally think after COVID, have any of us learned, like, if we're going to pay something extra, shouldn't it be on ventilation? So I think that's actually not a very hard sell to a lot of, especially owners of affordable housing, but even in market rate, I think it translates to something that people are willing to pay a little more for. We are tracking very closely these costs, and I will say there's a little bit of a caveat, right? Massachusetts, compared to other states, our stretch code is probably a lot higher than what the base case would be in a lot of other states. These are all affordable housing also, which the owner is going to be a long-term owner, is very mission driven. In Massachusetts, I would say affordable housing has always been sort of on the edge, the leading edge of green building. And so these are the best projects that are deciding to move up to Passive House. But the sales on the cost side hasn't been very hard. Of course, these projects are just starting to get done, so we don't always have the data on performance, but Michelle's first project is done. This is the distillery in South Boston, and we're fortunate because Boston has an energy disclosure ordinance, so it's pretty easy to compare to other similar buildings. And so you'll see here, the distillery is in green with the energy use intensity, And the lead buildings that were built in a similar time frame, similar typology, are in purple, and then the code ones are in blue. And so 62% lower EUI. That's pretty dramatic. You know, I think there's a lot of skepticism, honestly, from some policymakers about passive really performing the way that we say it will perform. And so what I would say is, like, we see similar data in Philadelphia, where there's energy disclosure ordinance. Green Building United sees, you know, 57% better for the passive house projects compared to the code ones. And we need to start building more and more of this to validate, because there is still skepticism around that. So after this, we launched our program. Passive House Massachusetts was out there lobbying really hard for our state efficiency program to do a similar offering through the MassSAVE program, and they were successful. So 9 months later, after our program was launched, MassSAVE for both market rate and affordable projects came up with a $3,000 per unit incentive for anybody who would go and get certified. And I will say, I really love how ICF and the MassSAVE program have administered this program. They have these early incentives, pre-design ones, to sort of talk the design team and the owner into seeing whether, analyzing whether passive house is going to be a good fit. So they provide feasibility study money, and they provide modeling money, and then when you actually certify, you get this bigger incentive. And that has led to this 87 buildings. So at one point we had, I think, 102 signed up. Some of those projects disappeared with COVID and didn't get their permits, and some people decided not to continue on, but we still have 86 buildings enrolled, over 5,000 units. The other thing I really like what MassSAVE and ICF and Passive House Mass have done is they've really paired it with a lot of educational offerings. And I mean, Passive House Accelerator has so much great content, but so does Passive House Mass's website. So go to that video library that's down there at the bottom if you're ever looking for additional content. And so now we're gonna jump, I'm gonna hand it over to Michelle and let her jump into the details of the projects that I know you guys are all on to hear about. Michelle?
Awesome. Yes, thanks, Beverly. That was awesome. And I'm frankly going to repeat a couple of things that Beverly said, because they're just like so noteworthy and necessary to articulate how we've gotten where we're going. But fundamentally, you know, we see Passive House as building inherent value into every building, period. And there are a lot of, it's a very complicated process. It's a very complicated path. It's not easy, but if I were to sum it up, I think that these are the 5 words that I would kind of focus on. So intention is sort of at every level, as is teamwork. Communication cannot be underestimated, and I think we often think that we are speaking in shorthand, but we really need to be more explicit. And I want to talk a little bit about that. Craft. We have long underappreciated and undervalued our building community, and we cannot do these projects without them. And so we must not only express how important the work they're doing is, but also give them the tools and the support to actually do it the way we expect it to be done. And then ultimately, as good as we all can try, mistakes happen and there are issues that have to be addressed. So confirmation is really important. Next, Beverly. Yeah. So we, as Beverly said, we started with the distillery, top left. We completed Finch last year, which was a long time labor of love and so exciting to see come out of the ground. We now have 12 or so in the works, all committed and all on track to get there. And we're just delighted with the uptick. Next. And that is, again, just to reiterate, not in small part because of the amazing work that the state has done and local organizations have done. So we did, you know, in 2015, this was a huge coup to acknowledge the passive house as an alternative compliant path. But then the MassCEC incentives really, really set the stage for what became a version of the Mass Save incentives. And there are communities out in force. There are, it's amazing. And there are codes and et cetera. So we have to, none of these projects works without a pretty substantial team. And I think that we tend to want in our minds to make that a pretty small team, but the truth is it's just not. And so I've probably missed some people, frankly, in this team, but every one of these trades mattered. Every one of these sub-consultants mattered. And we need to be, I think, just thinking strategically about how beautiful it is to bring all that expertise together and just find the right synergies and move forward. Next, that's the building. No, sorry about it. So I do want to talk about communication next. Thank you. Because this is really what so we're learning how to design these buildings. Lots of architecture firms are learning how to design these buildings. Lots of mechanical firms are figuring out how to do the ventilation and figure out, if efficient heating and cooling systems that are based on that fabulous envelope that we've designed. But then you have to actually get it done in the field. And this is really what I want to focus on, which is how do we communicate our intentions to the builder and the folks that are working for the builder, the sub-consultants, right? They're sub-consultants. And so how do we speak in the language that is going to be proactive and successful in that conversation? And so they work in schedule. We work in schedule when we're in CA. As a general rule, there's often a 3-week look ahead. We talk about, end dates regularly. We talk about sequencing. And then what we often don't talk about, but I think what becomes so critical is, okay, if you know the schedule and we're talking about the sequence, who's really involved and who's going in first? Like, let's really get into that next. So here's an example of a 3-week look ahead. Totally do not need to read the minutiae here. The point is that we want to plug into this and we want to say, okay, where are there particular aspects of work that are starting to hit on something that's pretty critical to our passive house envelope? And if that's there, then let's see that it's coming and let's plan a call in advance to involve every trade that might be involved in that line of work so that we can make sure that our assumptions about the sequence are actually accurate. And very often we find out that we made inaccurate assumptions. I know it's a shocker. Well, mostly accurate, but like occasionally like a few nuances. Oh, shoot, you can't do that first. Oh, darn it. So we're really working within this language next. And that language then gets translated into, okay, a sequence that's happening in plan that we can all kind of talk through. Red is red hot, coming soon. Orange is coming next, right? Like this is not rocket science, but it is a new way of just thinking collectively about what's coming next. And then, okay, you have that red hot spot that we really got to talk through because it has so many critical intersections and details and sequence issues and whatever. Let's get on the phone. Let's talk through it. Let's rethink it if we need to. Let's make sure that we don't have to remediate after the fact because we actually just executed it the way we intended the first time because it's new construction. Next. And so we've been more and more doing this. And next. I think ultimately it goes a long way. And then at the end of the day, we still miss things, right? We all just still miss things. There are things that can't get buttoned up until late. There are problem aspects that just are our Achilles heel. There are these really wonky weak points that we don't understand. And so this is when we need the confirmation, and we need it on so many levels. And I praise New Ecology for being on this project and just sticking with us. Thank you, Tom, because I really didn't know that we would get there. Oh, look, I'm seeing Mark. He's got the thumbs up. I mean, like, seriously, we went several extra miles to figure out, oh my God. And so with that, I think I'm just going to turn it over to Tom.
Michelle, that was great, and thanks Bev too for the intro. It's been super exciting to work on a lot of these projects and figure out how to translate from the verifier's perspective. New Ecology was the Passive House, the FIAS verifier on this project. A handful of the others in the CEC Passive House Design Challenge as well. So I think next slide. So continuing on Michelle's theme of communication, this is really a lesson in using the testing as a communication tool. So more and more we've been doing early and often with whole building blower door tests. So whole building blower door in commercial buildings in Massachusetts, not code required. Even in a lot of residential buildings, not code required. It's a passive house building. It might be the first time a team has ever done a blower door test like this. So that is a long ways off from communicating just how tight a passive house building needs to be. And these are the multiple blower door tests that we did along the way. And just looking over on the right-hand column, what that does to our airtightness as we test and explain and test and explain and test and find and correct and explain throughout. So I just want to share some photos before we jump to the Q&A. So the next slide. So this is what things look like at the first whole building blower door. A lot of intentional openings, things that aren't finished yet. So we're doing temporary construction to actually run the test, which is always a challenge in very complicated buildings. We're finding major leakage and addressing it before things get fully buttoned up. So next slide. And as we go along, we're finding smaller and smaller gaps. We're still, like you see the top of the elevator there, we're still, not quite having a fully complete whole building air barrier, but we're able to test and find the additional leakage. So next slide. Getting closer, things are getting tighter. Some things are like these piping penetrations are interesting for folks who are learning how to do them, following not just our requirements for air barrier testing, but also the plumber's requirements and the code requirements, and how do the fire safety requirements. There's a lot going on with things like that to get those tight, which certainly did by the end of the day. And I think the last slide is really lessons learned for the next projects as well. So once we get to the end of the day, that image on the left had the whole building going, one single blower door fan, and we were able to hear the whistle of a window that arrived without its gasket complete. So we were able to identify a broken window that could be repaired. And then another lesson learned, that image on the right there is electrical conduit, very complicated, lots of it going into the building. And something to keep figuring out for the next one. But we did get there. So big shout out to Michelle for her confidence in pushing us really to the end, and Groom as well for sticking with us, the GC there, because yeah, they went through us for each of those, I forget how many, 6 or so tests.